Hello film fans, and welcome to this episode of The Sherlockian. Now, are you one of those people who say, well, you should really read the book? Like, for instance, if anyone ever says to me, oh, I watched Lord of the Rings last night, I say, oh, have you read the book? Or if anyone says, I really loved the film Troy, I normally reply, oh, have you ever read the Iliad? Because that's much better. Well, this might be the first review ever where somebody says, oh, you know Jurassic Park? Oh yeah, don't bother reading the book. Now, if you've watched my review of the film Jurassic Park, you've probably noticed I was slightly mean about the original source material, and I admitted in that review that I felt a bit mean doing so. After all, Michael Crichton did actually help to co-write the screenplay for the film, so it's clearly his vision as much as it is Steven Spielberg's. However, I must admit this might be one of the most disappointing books I've ever read, because they take a concept like dinosaurs running around eating people, and they make it really boring. Now, there's a few reasons why this is. One is that it starts off really well with a sense of kind of horror that the film's never quite captured. There are obviously bits that are sort of horror inspired in the film, like I mentioned in my review when the goat leg fell on top of the car, and just any scenes, the scene where Ali Sattler is really pleased because they've just got the power back on, and then the raptor attacks her from behind. There's quite a few scenes that have kind of a horror inspiration, but the start of the book is much darker. It inspires the events of the second Jurassic Park film, where the dinosaurs have sort of basically, some of them escaped destruction and got off the island. And there's this quite horrifying bit where there's this woman in Costa Rica who's looking after a maternity unit, like late at night on her own. And she sees these strange little reptiles running around. She just assumes they're lizards. And then she comes into one of the maternity units, and she finds one of the newborn babies that are in like intensive care, because I think they've been born slightly premature. One of them's had its face eaten off by these reptiles, and she just covers it up. She just says, "Oh, it died in the night because it was you're born too early." And there's other bits as well. One of which they actually take inspiration for in the second Jurassic Park film, where the little girl she thinks they're birds, she's trying to feed the compugnatus, and there's loads of them. Again, that happens as well. And that bit's really good. It feels quite dark and sinister and intimidating. And then they kind of just forget about it. It's a bit weird. So that's one of the reasons. However, the main reason is the way dinosaurs are used in the book. Now, in my review of the film, I pointed out that Spielberg, and indeed Crichton as well as the scriptwriter, were actually very clever in the way they use dinosaurs. They start off with a big reveal when you see the brachiosaur at the beginning, and then after that there's a lull where you actually don't see many dinosaurs. In fact, they even make a joke out of the fact on their tour of the park they can't seem to see any, and Ian Malcolm makes several rather cynical and sarcastic references, over the video feed. They should perhaps decide to get some dinosaurs for their dinosaur-themed theme park. Whereas in the book, you really get saturated by dinosaurs long before you ever see them escape. You're actually kind of bored by them. It sounds a bit weird, but it's true. You just kind of think, oh yeah, there's another dinosaur, and by the time they escape, you sort of think, oh yeah, well they've escaped now. Yeah, well maybe they'll do something interesting. But they don't really. The other thing that slightly annoys me is it kind of feels a bit like Jaws. Not Spielberg's film of Jaws, which is brilliant, but the book Jaws. Now, you can kind of give Jaws a pass for making the shark the villain, making it kind of a monster which seems to just want to go around attacking people. Because that's kind of how people saw great white sharks at the time. They assumed that, they're big predators, they just happen to like eating people. That's why people get attacked by them. Now we sort of know that actually attacks generally happen because the shark confuses humans with seals or other common prey species, or the humans happen to get within their space, or it might just be sort of a freak event. Generally speaking, sharks don't look to attack people. They're not the right kind of prey. They don't have the kind of high fat content that great white sharks are actually looking for. But in, obviously, the book Jaws, the shark sort of swims around, and deliberately hunts people. And it's kind of the same in Jurassic Park. The big predatory dinosaurs, the raptors and the T-Rex, they kind of seem to have like an unhealthy obsession with hunting people. And you kind of think, I can understand, when they first escape, when the car's right next door, like in the film, why the T-Rex would attack them. Because, it's bored and, it clearly, is enjoying itself, trying to make the people run. And, it's kind of a very easy thing for it to decide to do. It gets out immediately, and there's some people nearby, and it's feeling hungry, and it wants to, a bit of a, kind of chance to toy with its food, so it attacks them. It makes sense. But I like that actually for the rest of the bit where they're trying to get back to the park administration centre, they're not actually dodging attacks from T-Rexes all the time. They see the T-Rex once, but they hide from it, it hunts dinosaurs, starts eating it, and they slowly just back away, and it doesn't even seem to see them. I liked that because it makes it sound like, as it actually says in the film's script, the dinosaurs aren't evil, they're just doing what big predatory dinosaurs do, they're hunting. Whereas the dinosaurs in the book seem, they constantly keep attacking Grant and the two children as he's trying to get back to the main sort of visitor centre. And there's even a bit where they accidentally come within a cage of pterosaurs, and they attack them as well. And you're thinking, dinosaurs. I know, obviously, that in the evolutionary timeline, dinosaurs and humans didn't interact, so we can't be absolutely certain how they might react if the two met each other. But it seems to me very unlikely that most modern animals don't immediately attack people if they see them. If anything, they seem to be quite nervous around people. It's only if you keep them in captivity for a long period of time, they get used to people, or they come into close contact with people, a lot in, say, urban areas, that they ever, lose that fear of humans. And it just seems like all the dinosaurs are just sort of kind of, just monsters that seem to want to attack people on sight. Now, you could argue that the pterosaur scene is actually a kind of throwback to Conan Doyle's The Lost World, where they actually get into a pterosaur colony and the pterosaurs all attack them and they're running away and trying to shoot them, and it's quite an evocative scene. It's one of my favourite scenes in The Lost World, actually. But that makes sense because they're actually in the dinosaurs' territory. They're actually by their nest. They're defending them like modern animals would do. It doesn't make sense in the book because they just happen to wander into the aviary or through it because they're on the raft going down the river. And then the pterosaurs just decide to attack them for no reason. Although I did like the bit where one of the T-Rexes actually swims. I thought, I wonder if that gave them the idea for doing that in David Attenborough's Prehistoric Planet. It's kind of a bit weird when you sort of reread the book and you sort of think, oh yeah, the Prehistoric Planet weren't even the first people to do that. I actually remember reading this for the first time and thinking, that's really weird. I suppose T-Rex probably could swim, but it sounds a bit odd because the idea it kind of swims kind of like treading water, because obviously you've got the big back legs but the very small sort of forearms. I remember thinking, that looks really odd. I can't imagine that. And then when I saw it in Prehistoric Planet, it didn't seem that weird at all. It kind of fitted in. But that is a kind of quite a fun nod, which you don't obviously, well, I didn't get when I first read it because obviously that hadn't been created yet. But other than that, most of the dinosaur scenes are a bit sort of, they're more miss than hit after the first chapter, essentially. The one thing I would say as well, and this has been done to death, I'm sure, is that the book is also, there's large sections which are really, really, really tedious. When Crichton and the characters are, well, Crichton through the characters are discussing maths, and it's so dull because you get Ian Malcolm, who, like in the film, is convinced that the park is doomed to fail. He's a chaos theoretician, and he says, by chaos theory, the worst thing that will happen. Nature will always find a way. These dinosaurs will escape, and it will just be carnage, and you really shouldn't have created them in the first place. But unlike the film, when he says that in like 2 scenes, it's clearly set up for something bad going wrong. So you're actually listening, thinking, oh yeah, this is set up for something. You feel, invested. In the book, it just goes on for pages, and you sort of think, I don't really want somebody to sit there and explain chaos theory to me. I just want to see some dinosaurs run around and some interesting characters and stuff happen, which might be because I'm a bit shallow. But then one of the other characters who works at the park says, no, actually, Malcolm's, theory is entirely based on wrong data, and then goes on this entirely different theory, and you're thinking, look, I've seen the film, I know all these dinosaurs escape. I admit, if you read this book for the first time, maybe you wouldn't know that, but it's clearly set up that something bad is going to happen. And you sort of think, I don't want someone here to sit here and say, well, actually, it's not going to happen because of this. It's all right if they say it, because that's kind of within their character, but I don't want 5 pages explaining the theory behind it. I just want somebody to say it and then get on with it. It's just really, really tedious. Obviously, there are some things that the book does differently to the film. For one thing, Ian Malcolm's character, a lot more people die for a start than in the film. They probably, obviously, quite a few people die in the film, but the most famous examples of where the book deviates, or well, the film deviates from the book, because obviously it came first, The first is obviously Ian Malcolm, who actually spends most of the book dying, essentially. He kind of goes into these kind of morphine-induced rants at times, which just bangs on about like, you know, theory and chaos theory and data and maths. Actually, I quite enjoyed those bits because it kind of, you know, it's more amusing than when he was talking about it for real in the first half of the book. But the other person that dies is John Hammond himself, which is actually quite interesting. It's very kind of pride goeth before a fall. It's very much in keeping with the kind of doomed themes of the book, if you like. You know, the whole idea that the park was doomed to fail from the start, and the idea that Hammond dies as a result of his own hubris is quite cool. And he's not even eaten by one of the cool dinosaurs, you know, like T-Rex or the Velociraptors. He's eaten by the compognathus, which are obviously they're really little small dinosaurs, which actually weren't in the original film. They're in the second one. And actually, his death is quite grisly. He gets torn to death by them, you know, when he's still alive, by these tiny little dinosaurs. And when he's, I think he's fallen down a cliff or something, so he's a bit groggy, and that bit's quite nasty. Though, so that is actually quite, I think, a good addition to the book over the film. But overall, yeah, I can't say I'm a massive fan of the book. I think with Michael Crichton, I think I mentioned this before in my Jurassic Park film review, there's quite a lot of good ideas behind his work. But I've never been a massive fan of the way he kind of tries to present them. I think his style is a little bit clunky. And so I think actually adaptions of his ideas ultimately often work out better than the original product. You see that with, you know, Westworld, the original film of Westworld. I quite like the idea they got Yul Brynner back as the gunslinger, but other than that, it's actually quite a clunky kind of plot. I think, you know, the TV series more recently, which did Westworld, do it much better. The idea of a theme park, which it's used robots, but they've gained sentience and now don't want to just be, you know, random characters that, you know, they get killed. They actually want to, you know, live their lives, kind of thing. It can't be said for all his products, it has to be said. I think the 13th Warrior and what's it called? Oh, Timeline. I don't know if you've ever seen, that's an awful film. But they are not very good adaptations of his work. I think, you know, in those cases, the original work was better. Apart from anything else, 13th Warrior is really difficult to adapt because the whole structure of it is written like an Islamic text from, I can't remember exactly when, but, you know, like the Dark Ages. So it's actually very, very difficult to adapt the same, in fact, virtually impossible, I should think, to adapt it in exactly the same way it was written. What made the original story brilliant, the idea that the story of Beowulf is being told from a different perspective by an outsider. So overall, I mean, I'm glad Crichton wrote Jurassic Park because it meant we got the film Jurassic Park, but I can't say I'm a massive fan of the book. I remember being actually quite disappointed the first time I read it. I really wanted to like it, and I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. That said, there are good bits in it, and I would definitely recommend anybody who hasn't read the book and maybe has watched the film to read it at least once, just because, you know, it gives a quite interesting perspective on where the film came from and the things the film did differently. It actually makes you appreciate the film a lot better. And it makes you realise that it's probably one of the best adaptations ever made, Jurassic Park, the film. So that's good. I mean, if it makes you appreciate the original, well, the film medium even more, that can only be a good thing anyway. Anyway, that was the Sherlockian. Thanks very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please think of subscribing to the channel. I'll be very grateful for your company in future videos. But yeah, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.